Hi, my name's Keith Cooper from Northlight Images. In this video I'm going to address a question I was asked the other day by somebody. What do you actually get out of printing things? How has it contributed to your photography? Now, this was because I often say that learning to print contributes to your general photographic ability, all sorts of things. But they said, well, yeah, all right, okay then. What difference has it made to your photography? And they got me thinking as to which bits, and I've got quite a few different bits and pieces, and they may or may not be relevant to you. Which bits actually I feel where print has made a difference. Being able to print things has contributed in some way to my overall photography, which I do as a job, by the way. So I'm a professional architectural industrial photographer, and so it has helped there as well. Obviously doing lots of photography is the basic thing, always helps, but the simplest, and some of these pictures I'll show here, there are videos about the making of the prints. So I'm going to start with this one here. It's a picture I took. This was taken on film, and I can't remember the details of it. I've got it in the video looking at it. And this particular one here, the key lesson I learned here was cropping. Now the picture, I processed it, I had a contact sheet, and for ages never did anything with it, never thought much of it. It wasn't until I scanned the film and got to playing around with it, ready to make a print, that I found out that by drastically cropping off some of the beach, I completely changed the composition and made it a print that I actually liked, a print that I still like, a print that I have up in the house. It's on the Suffolk coast, a place called Shingle Street, and that picture, more than anything, convinced me that you don't actually need to take that much notice of the aspect ratio of the film. 3:2, digital sensors mostly 3:2, although this this GFX 100S I've got here, this is native 4:3 aspect ratio, medium format. You can set this to sub aspect ratios. I prefer to actually do that after I've taken the picture rather than necessarily work with crop. I will sometimes work in crop mode on this, but that's when I'm using an adapted lens, and there's sort of technical reasons for doing things like that. But in terms of actually appreciating how much you can change your picture just by cropping, that was a really important one, because up until then, I suppose I'd printed in the darkroom and I'd looked maybe at changing the format or something to fit a different size of paper rather than the film size or something like that, but I never really thought much about doing detail of it. And that's where that one comes in. But that's that picture there. Next one up would be simplicity. In looking at prints that work, and I'll come back to print size and how that changes things. Printing images, I found the ones that worked were often fairly simple. You can get away with more complexity in larger pictures, but I mentioned that separately. So I've got an example I took on a beach here, black and white picture. A friend of mine walking along, it's a lovely sunny day. Tide had gone out and this water was warm. I was being careful not to drop anything in it. It's the sea. It's at Brancaster Bay, and that just has a simplicity about it that works. Now it works for me because I remember that particular day in April 2006, and I remember it well. But as an image, I think it works okay on its own as a print. The balance of structures in the picture, it helped with my overall composition. And cropping is changing composition in a way. But in many ways, in thinking of things that are going to be prints, thinking about compositions and structures and layouts that work as a print has really helped me simplify aspects of my photography. And that, from a commercial point of view, is obviously great, because quite often I have a message or something to show in a picture, and being able to get rid of extraneous things, or at least tone them down through your composition, how you do stuff, really does help. I found that makes a big difference. So that's a black and white one there. Colour picture, this was driving across one of the flat bits of Oregon, and that is the classic example of cropping a little bit. I've changed the aspect ratio a little bit, but putting effectively the horizon right at the bottom, putting the subject matter, the wind pump, the tree right down, so you can see most of it is about the sky. But if it were just a sky, it wouldn't necessarily be that interesting. Having something in there, having the corn which has just recently been cut, having that there, that makes a difference. So that's, yeah, that's another one for simplicity. Great Sand Dunes National Monument. Now in this one, this is one, and I said I'd mentioned size. This is a picture that if you look at it at a small size, all you'll see is a dot or maybe a couple of dots. It's only when you print this one large that you can see that there is actually a person and a child, and they are walking across the sand, and the wind is whipping the sand up so that their feet are blurred because there's just that layer of sand that blows across when there's a wind. That's a Great Sand Dunes National Park, and but you only really see that in terms of as a larger print. That one I have printed large, and it looks quite impressive. As a small print, it just looks brown with a dot on it, and that's it. And that's the key thing that I found, is know what your pictures are going to be used for. A picture that you take that's going to look great on Instagram on a phone needs a different composition to something that's going to be printed as a 3 foot by 4 foot print, or a 3 foot square print. Very different. People look at things very differently, and I discovered that in looking at prints in terms of detail, how you look at screens, how we see things, and all of that reflects back on how you actually view the subjects you're taking, decide on what you're going to take, lens choices. All of those little bits there, they are all influenced by compositional choices, that what you really want to do. Simplicity there, a tree, there's another one. This was taken in Colorado. The slight off-center gives a bit of instability to it. So it's not just a tree slap bang in the middle of the picture. That's taken at quite a height somewhere during fall in Colorado. The colours are great. The colours are really nice on that, and the colours on a good printer will print reliably. Now, one of the bits that I've got into more as I got into printing was colour management. I come back to aspects of colour management, but you need your colour management right. And if your colour management is right for print, colour management is right for images that are viewed on screen, colour management is right, and your editing as well is right for sending pictures off to clients, which the vast majority of photographs I take are sent off to clients electronically, and I've no idea whether they're ever printed. Most of them probably aren't. But knowing colour management through print has helped me refine my workflow and have a much more efficient workflow for work as well, even if I'm not printing. But it just happens to make obviously some nice looking prints as well. Now, another one here, when you're taking pictures, in terms of print, in looking at what worked for a print, and this is one that you could quite easily say, well, I don't need to print to know this, but I learnt it through print. Is that, and this is a picture taken in Canada, some falls somewhere, or rapids somewhere, and in looking at this I got several photographs of this scene. This is the one that works the best, and why that is because the essential random nature of the foaming water here. You can set up the general look, but then I find quite often for active things like this I have to take several pictures. And I found that this particular one, the water, the lines in it, composition works fine. Another picture, it's not as obvious as that, and it just doesn't grab your attention quite as well as that one would. Quite a subtle difference, but it's meant that I take more pictures, because I've appreciated that certainly with wide angle shots, a slight movement of cloud in the sky can change the balance of shapes, can change the balance of lighting, can do all sorts of things, and it can happen in just a few seconds. And I say certainly wide angle lenses, where you tend to get distortion in the corners. Certainly if you look at a sky like that, take some pictures If you're unsure of this, just get as wider angle a lens as you can. On a day with lots of cloud, breaks in the cloud, perhaps where the clouds are moving quickly. Take a series of pictures and look at how the subtle differences of cloud movement change the composition for the sky. This is one of those things that you just cannot predict. So even in my commercial work, as a result of that, if I'm taking pictures, architectural work, and there are clouds in the sky, I may take 2 or 3 with clouds in slightly different positions, but essentially of the same shot. Now, for a picture like this print that's on the wall in the background here, it's a clear blue sky, doesn't really matter. There, it was a matter of waiting to the right time for the lighting angles to be right. Didn't really matter, it was a clear blue sky, so that worked just fine for that. But take more pictures and allow for the subtle changes between pictures, because quite often people forget that. They think, right, there's the landscape, I'll get everything set up for it. Ooh, the lighting looks like, yeah, I'll take it. And they don't notice that perhaps 2 or 3 minutes later, subtle movements of clouds have changed the feel, the composition, how the elements of the scene relate to each other. Sometimes I said about big print composition. This is a picture taken in Ohio Pass in Colorado. It's obviously fall, and this is quite high up, and it was an absolutely majestic scene. The light, the warmth, the late summer day, early fall. It was a superb scene. Now, I took quite a few photographs of this, and I have never come across one of them that goes anywhere near matching the emotional impact of the scene. Now, I do know that this particular one, with a bit of editing and printed at about 3 foot by 4 foot, 3 foot by 5 foot, looks impressive. It almost works, but it doesn't quite work for me. Now, I was there, so I've got my own interpretation of that one as well. It's also, I think it was the first time Karen had been to Colorado as well, and I think she was mightily impressed, if not by the altitude, then certainly by the colours. It was a very good year for the colours. Now, that is one of those ones that, if it's small as a print, and small I mean even A4, yeah, it's okay, but it's too cluttered. There's too much detail in it. So it comes back to that simplification bit. Now, I've looked at this and the other versions. When I next have a very big printer to test, I may well revisit this and see if I can actually make a print that I really like from it. But it'll be a big print. Now, yeah, I've been lucky in having big printers to test. If you are limited to A4 or even A3 plus for your printer, if you are limited by that, then I'm afraid that you're going to have to just accept that sometimes prints might look better even bigger. Yeah. Don't let it put you off printing though. Many of these things that I've put here, this print here, I originally printed this one at only just over A4. And use that. But that is a print that I go back to because I want it to work. If it does work, I'm not sure. I'll go back to the original raw files, I'll reprocess them, I'll do all sorts of things. But I know what I want to get out of it. And that's one of the things that printing has also helped me with, is actually give me the idea of a destination for an image. If I know I want a print from this. Now, I could say I want an image which I could print, but I'm actually going to send off the image to clients. That's fine. But it gives me in my editing, rather than just to do A, B, C, D, E, and there's your picture produced. It doesn't ever work like that. The more I edit images, the less I believe in a standard workflow. The workflow, you have to look at the image. So it's helped, doing stuff for print has helped my editing of images altogether, even as I say the ones I might just send off to people for just as digital images. In terms of big prints and composition, what about panoramics? Panoramics are one of those things that people think, oh, I'll have a go at doing that because they can. And too often you end up with an image that is, hey look, it's a big wide image. not, hey look, this is an interesting image or one of something. You need to pay careful attention to the whole width. As your aspect ratio goes wider and wider for panoramics, you end up with either a collection of individual images or you need some overall flow to the image. Now this particular one, the reflections here, this works as a large print. I've done this one. This was up in Colorado as well, just south of Ouray, if I remember rightly. And yes, it works. Once again, panoramic image print like this. If you print it at this side, yeah, it looks quite pretty. Looks like that. But if you print it at that size, that's when it really starts making a difference. Now, as I say, you don't have to print big, but I found if you get a chance to try some big prints, and it's not going to bankrupt during the process, have a go at doing it. Because although I said this is what I've learned for doing printing, I should be more honest and say this is what I've learned for my photography by doing printing and being able to do very, very big prints. Now, in terms of big prints, this particular one, this is from Ecola State Park. This is on the Oregon coast. Cannon Beach is just down there. This particular shot works. I've got a 10-foot in the corridor just outside here. I've got a 10-foot long print of it on canvas. I've got a video about that. I'll try and fish out the link to it and you can see the actual canvas. But once again, that is one that works at scale. How well does that work at smaller scales? Well, the problem with panoramics is as you get onto a reasonable sized piece of paper, your print ends up being quite narrow. So it ends up being quite small, and that's difficult to print. So this is something you ideally want. You want roll paper. Now, an example of it would be, here's one. This is a crop from an individual shot, and I did this one. Did an article, a video the other day about this particular shot, about its processing and things like that. But that's a vertical panoramic, although it's actually just a crop from a single frame, but printed this big. So that's a picture that just happens to work very well. So panoramics can look good, but once again, they need to be big sometimes. This has got to be the best example. This particular one here was printed. The print of this is 44 inches high by over 14 meters long. This really is an example of, I did this one because I could. Now it's interesting, experimental in techniques in the way this is put together, and I have got an article. Long predates my making videos. There is a detailed article about the making of this image here and various problems I had in producing it. But this was absolutely fascinating to see people walk past. This one gave me a really strong impression of how space wasn't defined from just one viewpoint. How that by blending pictures together from different viewpoints, you could get a feel for a space that was different and in some ways perhaps more attuned to the real space, walking around it, than it would just from a simple picture. This one is still rolled up the canvas in a tube in my office, and this one here is waiting a home for some time. I know that the city of, this is Leicester City Centre, the Leicester City Mayor wanted this picture, and I said, yep, you can have it, I'll give it to the city. All you need to do is find a sufficiently large wall to mount it on. And unfortunately weren't able to find a suitably large. The Leicester Museum wanted it as well, but they also had not got a 47-foot long wall spare to show it on. But no, maybe one day it'll be shown again. Oh, we're back to Ohio Pass. And this is a reminder that not every picture I take is for print. And in printing, that helped me think of, why am I taking this picture? Am I taking it for a print? Am I taking it for a record of a situation? Am I doing it obviously for a job? But am I just taking it because I like taking the picture? You don't need to print. As I say, and the difficulties this one I've mentioned already, so I'm sure I will come back to that one again. Now, will it print? This particular picture and this one, it's got that roughness you get of backlit surf when the sun is at a low angle. Makes it a bit more interesting with the reflection off the beach. This is on the coast, probably in Oregon, might be on Washington, but we've got a line of pelicans just flying across the sun like that. Now, interesting looking picture. To print this, and this is another one I've tried printing, and this is one of the ones that shows me that sometimes you can take a great photo that looks great on screen, but because of the tonal differences between seeing it on a screen and seeing it as a print, it just won't make a great print. It won't have the luminosity this has. Now, I can bring up detail in the surf and things like that. I can do all sorts of things like that, but it just doesn't have the impact that I'd want. Now, always a problem when if you take pictures of, if you take pictures of sunsets and things like that. They look great on the screen, they look great on the back of the camera, they look great on your phone. But sometimes you think, well, that's a nice picture, but I'm never going to get a great looking print from that. Print just doesn't show it. You might try, inks on a metallic paper or something like that. A very glossy metallic paper. You might get some of that impact from it, but that's a tricky one to do. And it's, as well as printing, it's realizing I can't print this. Not being bothered by it. Yeah, that picture is one that if I want to see it the way I intended, I need to see it on a screen. Now that one looks even better on one of my 32-inch 4K monitors. Now that looks impressive, that looks great, but as a print, no. And therein lies, one of the things that printing in its way has taught me, that not everything works all the time, and that comes in for that. Now, for a classic sort of black and white one, when I do get a picture that works, paper choice is important. And in printing, I found out the difference that subtle changes in tonality in papers, in the range of tones you've got in the papers. So that waterfall I showed earlier was on a Barita style paper, so it's got quite a wide tonal range. In this experiment, I learnt quite a bit just recently in experimenting with Hahnemüller's metallic paper. Now, this is one that I did, and I did this as a limited edition of prints, and this is my artist proof, so hence why I pick it up and handle like this. This is a print done on a metallic paper. Now, I might be able to get it to show some of the impact like that. This has got to be the hardest paper I've ever printed on to find images that worked. Some worked, some didn't. This one, I particularly like it, but the stonework doesn't have a strong contrast range. This is a print that I would normally perhaps print on a matte art paper, rag type paper, but that it works on this. I did this when I was looking at, this is actually, says this is the artist proof. This is my test one. I did a limited edition of 3 copies of this, and there are only 2 left. Roll up now before they all go, he says, hopefully. But that is an example of something where I had to really think about the paper. Makes a big difference. This is the same paper, and here we've got a colour picture of some orchids, and here the metallic effect gives a really nice depth to them. But as I say, finding papers that work can be a bit tricky. Now, it's easier because I understand profiling, all the aspects of colour management right the way through, from taking pictures, how to expose properly, how to process the raw files, different types of editing, sharpening, all of those things with the aims of getting a print out of it at the end. All of those elements, as I've said, they work for my photography in general, but it also helps in understanding what I'm going to get from different types of papers, different types, different media, whether something might look okay on canvas. One other bit I did have to learn about this was that just because I like something on a particular media and don't like another media means absolutely nothing if you want to sell prints. Now, I've got lots of videos and articles about the business side of photography that look at selling prints. once you've made them. And one of the things you have to realise is just because you like something, somebody else may not. And just because you're not that struck on a picture, somebody else may find it absolutely great and want a copy of it. But that's a completely different matter. The business side of things is not that. So just rounding it up, there are lots of things I think ways print has contributed. Please do comment. I'd be intrigued to know how people themselves, what you get out of printing. Or even if you think it's a complete waste of money, and if you need a print, send your image off to a company which will print it for you. I disagree with that approach, but it doesn't mean that I don't respect it. If you don't want to do printing, don't. Find some other way of improving your photography. There are lots of them about. Anyway, I hope that was of some interest. As I say, ask away if you've got any questions, and thanks for watching. Bye.